So I'm recording now. This Huffington Post article, the person that's being questioned is Dr. David Muzina, a psychiatrist and national practice leader of the Medco Neuroscience Therapeutic Resource Center. All right. He brings up that in the last decade, there's been a decrease in the use of psychotherapy, also known as counseling and talk therapy for mental health disorders. And that we live in a society that looks for quick fixes, especially with complex problems, ironically. So going down to the last paragraph, they ask him, is there any evidence that these medications are helping women? I'm just going to read this to you, and I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know that it's definitely making them happier or more functional. What I would say is that these are effective treatments when someone is correctly diagnosed, receives the right medication at the right dose for the right duration of time. They can make a dramatic difference. In those cases, absolutely yes, they're helping women. So my question to you is, who knows the best whether a medication is making a patient happier or more functional?
The patient who's taking the medication.
And that's why the doctor asked the patient, how does he feel? Has he experienced his symptoms? These things relate to happiness and functionality, right?
Yes.
And he's asking the patient because he's not a psychic or something, right?
That's right.
So, that's why, to me, it is so key in my argument that I've been on psych meds at some points for 3 or 4 years at a time. Recently, 4, 6, 8 months at a time, just a couple years ago. And never for one moment in my entire life have they ever made me happier or more functional. So doesn't it seem insane that there's a lot of pressure from the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Department and the local mental health services and centers and my parents and people who really don't understand me, people I don't talk to. I've talked to you more in the last couple weeks than I've talked to my parents in the last 8 years. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you see how ridiculous it is for all these people who know nothing about me, including my parents, to kind of try to force me on drugs when they're not the patient. They don't know how I feel. They don't know how well I'm functioning. I do. And I have 4,000 videos to review my behavior on and off medications and in different moods. And I've seen every single last one of those videos. So my question is, do you see how ridiculous it is for them to kind of demand that I take drugs when I have, several people with psychology degrees, opinions. I have the opinions of people who know me best. I have an Army medic with an extensive background in dealing with, psychiatric patients, mental patients. You see how ridiculous it is?
Yes.
So their argument is so nonsensical. I have people like Dr. Colin Ross that prove my point. Dr. Thomas Saz, he was a professor of psychiatry for 65 years. He was retired, a professor emeritus, a retired professor from a respected college. Okay? And he says psychiatry is highly political. Okay? This is on record. Then I have some no-name beat cop trying to tell me that if I take psych meds, my life will get better. You see how ridiculous their argument is and the pressure I get from them?
Yes.
I've been treated completely unfairly by local law enforcement and the quote-unquote mental health services. And it absolutely disgusts me that there are a lot of people who wish to push a mental health agenda so they can create legislation that allows them to force sane people such as myself into treatment and even covertly drug them. And even from this interview alone, the way I talk, the fact that I'm using valid sources, a psychiatrist, not just a psychiatrist, but he's the national practice leader of the Medco Neuroscience Therapeutic Resource Center. Does it get any more valid than that? So just by this interview alone, this quick interview, you can see that, wow, it makes no sense for them to covertly drug him and try to justify it. The only explanation is that they are trying to mess up my political activity, like Professor Thomas Szasz said, because psychiatry is highly political. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Again, like always, I didn't pay you or tell you what to say, right?
No.
And if you change your story later on, you're telling the truth now and not later, right?
Correct.
All right. Thank you for the interview. All right. I just started recording. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I want to get your initial reaction. What is your reaction to that video?
It's distressing to watch.
All right. The video I sent her, folks, was psych ward, psychiatric abuse, and outpatient. I will record it. It's hard to say. I'm mumbling, partly because I don't want the people there to hear me, and partly because I'm very tired and weak. I say something along the lines of, I have a headache from the pills, and these are the consequences of listening to your parents about taking pills. So this is one of many examples I have on psychiatric medication. Now remember, the psychiatrists tell you, and I know because I've done a lot of research and I've talked to a lot of psychiatrists, that within 1 or 2 weeks, the side effects kind of dial down. I was about 4 or 5 weeks on psych meds. At that point, I was an outpatient, having gone to the psych ward and been transferred to outpatient. I went to the psych ward around my little brother's birthday at the end of July. And I got out in September, around September 14th. Okay? So, you can imagine someone who has had as many bad experiences, and that's proof of one right there, on psych pills, okay, that it makes no sense for me to want to take them. And I have people that flat out tell me at the psych ward, even cops, they say, when you do something that society doesn't approve of, there are consequences. What makes me sick is that some of them admit that this is punishment. This psychiatric abuse is punishment for your behavior. And other people say, oh, it's not your fault and we're just trying to help you. Do those contradictions disgust you the way they disgust me?
Yes.
And to me, it's just amazing how my parents miss this. And also shows you that one, either they're compromised somehow, they're being coerced, or they just are so out of touch with my life. They don't observe me on a regular basis. They hear less noise coming from my room and they assume that I'm better, when really I'm probably laying in bed in my room looking like that on psych meds. You see what I'm saying? And these are drugs, right? Just like alcohol, they increase your suggestibility. That's why women are taken advantage of on alcohol. And alcohol intoxicates you. These are toxic drugs. They have a toxicity level. And if you get too high, you're in danger of dying, just like you can die from alcohol poisoning. So you're intoxicated and your suggestibility is increased while people are trying to program you. And earlier we were talking about how more intelligent people tend to be the victims of psychiatric abuse, right? And that goes back to what I say about ignorance being bliss and knowledge, being discomfort and discontent. Any thoughts on that?
No, I just agree with what you're saying. I'm just a bit shocked at seeing the difference. It's just quite upsetting, to be honest.
Yeah. Can you imagine how I feel dealing with these people for over 20 years? I've been to reform school and behavior modification wilderness program called Ascent in Idaho. Freezing. It got like 30 degrees below zero when I was there. Really, really cold. I've never been in that kind of extreme cold. And, I was miserable, feeling empty and hopeless in the middle of the wilderness, sleeping in a teepee with no heating, cold, while the counselors and so on that watch us, the staff, they sit by a fire at night. We're in a teepee. You don't feel any warmth from the fire. We're freezing, miserable, feeling hopeless while they're trying to condition us and force us to think the way they want us to think, behave the way they want us to behave just so we can go home. I came back from that place with so much resentment and so much hatred that I still have not let it go. And it's been about 20 years exactly. And this is what they call treatment. This is what they call helping. We're just trying to help you. You know, and I've told them for over 2 decades, I don't want their help. And it comes a point when you start screaming, you know. You've told them calmly over and over again, and they keep doing things to make you feel like that, miserable, sick, because they don't like my political views. They want to provoke me to get me sent, to get me involuntarily admitted into the psych ward. And I have 13 witnesses on record. You know, you see how ridiculous this all is. And then cops and mental health are going to pretend like they're the good guys trying to maintain the morality, the law, and the order in society. Absolute hypocrisy. If they really believe that, they are extremely sick in the head and they have no business working in law enforcement. If they don't believe that, they are extreme criminals and they have no business working in law enforcement. Let me just play this quick clip to remind you. You listening?
Yeah. Oh, can I just say something? You have 14 witnesses.
Oh, yeah, it's 14 witnesses. All right. So,
did that atheist guy really tell you to provoke me to go to the psych ward?
Can you hear that?
Yes.
Doesn't that seem out of the ordinary?
Let me just play it one more again.
Did that atheist guy really tell you to provoke me to go to the psych ward? Yes. Doesn't that...
You see how I have people on record, and she, just like you know, said that if she changes her story in the future, she's lying then and not now. I do not coerce or force anyone. I don't even know where she lives. She has her own house, just like you do. I live with my parents. She makes more money than I do, you know, just like you do. Okay, it is ridiculous to think that this is some kind of a trick, or that I've convinced these, you know, these women to say things that they wouldn't otherwise say. You see what I'm saying? So
Yes.
just speak on that briefly. How crazy and how out of touch and how stupid would someone have to be to think that I've staged all this, or that I'm lying, or I made it up?
I just think it must be somebody who's doing it for intent. I don't think, you know, there's no other reason why anybody would not believe you. I just don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, these people have been hounding me my whole life. And I see it in more than just mental health. I see even martial artists harassing me, trying to get me to go train with them. I see religious people and political groups hounding me, trying to change my stance. I mean, this society we live in is a lot worse than people want to admit to themselves. It's like cognitive dissonance. You know what that is?
Yes.
That's what a lot of people are suffering from. They don't want to admit to themselves the kind of criminal, eugenic, pharmaceutical state we live in, that these people really abuse people at psychiatric institutions. And for society to say, oh, we don't care, so what, when 1 in 4 foster kids are on psych meds, 1 in 13 U.S. school kids, and 1 in 4 women are on antidepressants, you know, is like, wow, when are you going to care, America? When everybody's on psych meds? When they're raping you in front of your family? When do people say, you know what, that's too much? When do you think they will draw the line, if ever?
I don't know. I just think it's an ongoing battle. I just think you can't. It's a system it's just impossible to fight. But you can only just get your voice out there. That's all you can do. And just try to get the truth out and spread it.
You see what
because, you know, there's no such...
Go ahead, I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Saying that there's no such... Yeah, I was just going to say there's no such thing as psychiatrists knowing what you're going through.
But
there's no way of knowing that.
Do you see how when I get out the message, they're drugging me for it? They're punishing me for getting out the message, you know? And it's causing me physical harm.
I wouldn't say that. I think it's the fact they're trying to restrict you. It's about, you know, not being an influence on other people, because it's happening to so many people. So many people on, you know, psychotic drugs. They don't want people to be aware of what it actually is there for, what the purpose of it really is.
Yeah, it's so pervasive. It's so pervasive as well, because these guys are in prisons, they're in schools, they're in the military. It's like psychiatrists have set up shop everywhere, and they have a captive audience in many cases, and a lot of them are consultants for pharmaceutical companies. They take kickbacks, they do their advertisements, they speak at their, you know, little forums and meetings, and, you know, they really, it's just wow.
Well, the main reasoning behind it is the billions of dollars they make each year. So, you know, they don't care how many lives it costs. It's more about making money.
Yes, and they spend billions upon billions just on marketing. You know, more pharmaceutical companies more often than not spend more money on marketing than they do on research. And then they pay companies to suppress the generic drugs. They made it absolutely clear that they put profit over patients. And we have nurses at times, they will protest, you know, hospitals. Like not too long ago, a few years back, the Kaiser Hospital nurses were protesting, saying they're putting profit before patients, right? Kaiser has a psych ward as well. They have psychiatric services as well. And it's a very blatant example of putting profit before patients. They're putting basically eugenics, profit, and control before patients. And that's probably the dirtiest secret of psychiatry. Those three things, that's their philosophy, that's their purpose. It's an institution of profit, eugenics, and control. And there is institutional racism. A lot of liberals want to talk about institutional racism. Absolutely, there is institutional racism. These are mainstream social norms that can also be described as white social norms. I've had white supremacists tell me that the reason why they're helping run the psyop on me is not because they don't know how I feel about psychiatry's potential for you know, to as a institution that helps white supremacy, but because they do. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Basically, what they're telling me flat out is that we know that this institution helps us maintain white power. That's why we don't openly oppose it. But yeah, I kind of went over on time. Thanks for the interview. Again, like I always say, you know, I didn't pay you to say this, right?
No.
This is not scripted. You know, I didn't tell you what to say.
No, not at all.
And if you change your story in the future, you know, you're lying then and not now.
Yes.
And again, I try to tell this to everyone in my interviews. I don't mean to offend anyone, but I have to, you know, dot all the I's and cross all the T's. This subject matter is extremely important. I'm not some guy talking about aliens and reptilians and things that, you know, are questionable. I deal in the facts. I have over 10,000 valid sources. I have interviews with over 40 people on over 72 videos in my interview playlist. Check that out on my James Jackson channel or on the playlist section or the homes page rather of this Covertly Drug channel. And I have dozens of videos on my 9 Witnesses to PSYOP playlist. At the end it says now 14 because there's 14 witnesses. Thank you.
It's Halloween.